Hi everybody, it's Az here from HeelvsBabyface with AzChats number 51. Oh my goodness, so happy to have got AzChats 50 out of the way. That pressure off my shoulders. Hope you enjoyed it. Seemed to go down pretty well. But if you're new to my channel, and goodness gracious me, there has been a lot of you recently. A whole lot of going on. My AzChats videos are more podcasty type of a video as opposed to visual video. This is meant to be me fingering your ear holes as opposed to massaging your irises. So if you want to stay rooted at the PC and watch the screen as it goes by, I shall put some WoW footage for you to view. But if you've got stuff that you need to do around the house, it is Sunday, you might just want to get away and stuff the old turkey, because you're doing a roast for Sunday. Why? What else did you think I was going to say? Then by all means, crank up the volume of me in the background and you will get just as much out of this video as the person sat by the computer desk. And because this is also an AzChats, it may contain, and spoilers, I've actually done the introduction as the last thing to this video, so there's not huge amounts, but there is some. It may contain fruity language, i.e. language of an adult nature. So if you are offended by this sort of stuff, then just don't watch. Don't watch, don't put yourself through it. Or if you are unsure, maybe get your parents to watch a segment or two from it and see if it's going to be okay for you to do so. I have to get these things out of the way. The last thing I want or need is people saying, I didn't like your potty mouth. And then you say, but you know, I did tell you at the beginning. Yeah, but I didn't like it. You said words like shit and poo-poo and bugger. Anyway, so that's all done out the way. I hope we know where we stand. Now, because, and I've just let rip, of course, not that way. I have let rip that I've done this introduction before. No, sorry, after I filmed the video. If you look down to the counter, which is, of course, bottom right, bottom left, somewhere, tonight, it's a long one. And I've never, ever had to say that to anyone in my life before. But it is a long one today because the AzChats, I was going to select 5 questions from the Q&A, give my opinions about these 5 questions, and then just skim over the others. But as ever, I like that question, and then I like that question, and then I like that question. Before I know it, I'd answered about 8, 9, 10... I'd gone into them and sort of got my response. So I don't go in depth to every question. I have some which I spend much more time on than others and some that I just skim over completely. But I think I address all of the questions pretty much. But there was stuff like, stuff can be really condensed down. For example, the first 4 questions were about flying because they wanted to front load the Q&A as regards to the recent flying news. And so there were just some generic questions being asked about how long will it take to get the reputations with a 6.2 crew, and how long will it take for patch 6.2.x to be released, and all this kind of stuff. So Blizzard have said that it's still in development, that patch, because it does need some development issues. They want to get rid of some collision issues in the skies and all this kind of stuff. But they said they're not trying to gate patch 6.2.x so you get grounded in Tanaan for a specific period of time. They've just said, you know, needs developmental work. We are going to try and get it out for you as quickly as possible. So who knows? Might be 2 weeks. Might be 3 weeks, might be 2 months, whatever it may be, but they're going to put it out as a hot fix whenever it is ready to do so. So I can like push all of those to one side and get stuck into the meat and potatoes of some of the Q&A questions and the responses that Ian gives. So, before I tackle the very first question, one thing I've got to say about the interview as a whole. Ian didn't try and sidestep any questions. The questions that were put forward to him, he answered head on. There was no wishy-washy answers or half answers. He gave what I believe was his honest assessment of things. Doesn't mean that I necessarily agree with everything he said. There are definitely times that I'm going to kind of conflict with what's going on here. But at least that side of matters made me feel as if there was a little bit more, I don't know, humanistic side to Blizzard here. We definitely got to see, a side to which we hadn't seen in a long, long time. And it was definitely a side that, as a member of a community, I felt I could gravitate towards. That I could actually physically talk to these people. That I could at least, argue the toss, agree, disagree. But it had that sort of connection, which I was happy about. Whether or not they're going to continue this, I don't know. Because when we saw the Helinka Q&A, it was, to be honest with you, pretty much a joke, wasn't it? Hardly anything got answered, things were pushed aside, issues weren't tackled at all, and therefore we got a lot of people in the chat wanting to talk about PvP, and that had to get, again, pushed, saying, look, it's not Ian's remit, it's Helinka's remit. So, But, so we're going to jump in to the first question which I want to tackle, which is, why are current reputations all mob grinds? It seems like a step backwards. Can we get a more modern reputation system? So with what I've just said in mind, it was refreshing that Ian came out and said he isn't even going to defend 6.0 reputations. He said, yes, they were a complete mob grind. I'm not even going to defend them. They weren't. He said something which I thought was very interesting, where he said we weren't going to have reputations at all at one point in Warlords of Draenor. And it was sort of something that came in late in the game when they were constructing a couple of the Garrison buildings, like when they constructed the trading post. And they suddenly thought, wouldn't it be cool if we had some sort of reputation system that went alongside, people get some cosmetic items, yada, yada, yada. So I thought that was really weird, though, because I thought, if you took the reputations out of the game, what did you have? What would you have had at Endgame? Oh, that kind of makes me shudder. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. We'll kind of move on. And he did say that it has seemingly set reputations, or he did seemingly in patch 6.0 at least set reputations back many years. And he sort of used the analogy that the World of Warcraft has evolved since those days of grinding the bogs, what are they called? Bogs. The teddy bears. It's called them teddy bears. The teddy bears in Winter Spring and stuff like that, which I remember doing some reputation grind for that. It was hard work, and yes, I didn't enjoy it one thing. And it did feel as if it kind of regressed back to that point. Now, this is where I break away slightly from sort of understanding and empathizing with Ian here, because he said in patch 6.2, I have that on my bingo card. In patch 6.2, it reflects a different design with reputations. And he said it isn't just a mob grind. Now, that is kind of a little bit untrue, because as we know, people that want to get flying ASAP will do what's necessary to fulfill the criteria of the meta achievement. The criteria of the meta achievement is to get to Revered with the 3 new reputations. The Saber Stalkers, you can just kill them for rep, and people will do that. People will just get into groups, and they will just kill every Saber Stalker that moves to grind reputation till they get it to Revered. That is going to happen. Full stop. The other 2, however, work slightly differently, and he said that the core reputation for the Horde and the Alliance, that's Hand of the Prophet for the Alliance, and it's Vol'jin's Headhunters for the Horde, are more gated behind daily quests. And that is slightly misleading. I know I've just said he gives honest answers, but I don't think he intended to be misleading. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, but it's slightly misleading because you have to do an Apexis Crystal daily, which it doesn't physically point you to do to gain reputation with this faction. It doesn't say, if you do an Apexis Crystal daily from your command table, you will get reputation with us. It's never sort of hinted at whatsoever. It's never drawn upon. But you have to, when you complete it, it then opens up 2 more daily quests to do for those factions, but one of them, and it appears every day. And on the PTR, it has appeared every single day. And one of them is to do 2 more Apex's crystal zones in Tanaan Jungle. So if you want to stay on top of this reputation, you have to do 3 Apex's crystal zone grinds in Tanaan Jungle, plus 2 more daily quests on top of that. So that to me is a horrific grind. And that is a grind which will burn people out because they're already burnt out from Apex's crystal dailies. So I don't call that a step forward from what we've got now at all. It's easily on par, to be honest with you, if not slightly worse. Because, you know, with a daily quest, if you don't do a daily quest and it moves into the different day, you've just lost all that rep, period. So yeah, I wouldn't class this a step forward, and I've got to take up issue with his view on the Order of the Arakoa. Now, I am going to be doing a video of this, I think it's actually coming out tomorrow, on the Order of the Arakoa rep, but he says this is a reputation system that you gain rep by seeking out and defeating rares in Tanaan. That is technically correct. And there are some technically correct answers here, but the bigger picture, not necessarily. Because if you defeat a rare mob, you get 1 corrupted Apex's fragment and you need 10 to complete the quest line. However, if you go to an Apex's crystal zone, it is riddled, they are riddled with chests all around the place that glow purple, you know, with this new effect and whatnot. They glow purple. If you open up them, you can have 2, 3, 4 Apex's crystal fragments inside. And I'm sure Blizzard are kind of hoping that, well, since you're in this Apex's crystal zone, fancy doing an Apex's... You know, I'm sure they're trying to, like, entice you. When in Rome, you might as well fill your bar up and finish it off. Sort of business. So it actually works out much, much easier to do the Order of the Arakoa rep by going into an Apex's crystal zone and searching out for the chests, as opposed to searching out for the rare mobs, which are on an hour's cooldown, and people are literally just going to smash them down, and that's it for an hour. So you're going to be struggling to find rares, most likely, to fulfill the criteria for that rep. So, yeah, do I think 6.2 is improving reputations? No, not at all. I don't think it's improving reputations. So I think it's another kind of smoke and mirrors thing. And when you look at the inventiveness of something like how they did the Lore Walker rep, and I know you could do the Lore Walker rep really quickly, but I'm just looking at the actual inventiveness of the idea for gaining reputation with the Lore Walkers. It's just such a shame that we don't have anything of a kind of parity with that, at least idea-wise. And also, these 3 new reps, there's no narrative again. There's no storyline, so I don't give 2 shits about the Order of the Arakoa, and I don't give 2 shits about the Saberstalkers, and I don't give 2 shits about the Hand of the Prophet or Vol'jin's Headhunters, because there's no narrative to connect me to any of it. So, yeah. I understand the answer, and at least I'm glad that he answered the 6.0 and 6.1 reputation grind, honestly, but 6.2 ain't getting any better, folks. Right, let's move on to the next question. Apex's dailies feel like they take forever, and I just skip them every day. I cry every time. Any plans to bring back normal dailies? So first of all, let's go through Ian's response to that. Now he says, yes, dailies do have a place within the World of Warcraft, and 6.2 will bring in a couple, literally a few. There's a handful, not many. You're definitely not going to get burnt out because of them. And he said, we do what we do, and we overreacted to the Miss Pandaria swarm of dailies which we had, you know, with the Golden Lotus and the Klaxi and the Shadow Pan and all that kind of stuff. And he said, we swung the pendulum in completely the opposite direction. So they've gone from way too many dailies to suddenly no dailies and an Apex's crystal grind. And he said AP dailies weren't executed correctly either, so they didn't work out how they wanted to in the first place. And a big thing about that was the removal of any sort of story and context, which is just what I said in the previous answer, but, you know, by the by. They said they completely missed the mark as well when it came to the reward structure of Apex's crystals, when they spoke about when people finally took some of their, you know, couple of thousand or so of their crystals to War Spear or Storm Scale or wherever, and they went to the vendor and it was just like, what? This gear's shit. You know, I'm not grinding 2 months to get a better piece of gear than I've already got. Screw that. And then he said it was a clear failing. A Pegasus Crystal grinding was a clear failing on their behalf. But in 6.2, my bingo card has just got that on it. I got house immediately. In 6.2, he says that there is more context with the new reputations because you have like a covering daily quest and such to get you on the way. I disagree with that. I mean, first and foremost, great honest answer. I mean, he is a great honest answer. Again, very happy to see him not trying to bullshit Pegasus Crystal dailies and just telling it how it is. And you've got to respect that. You've got to respect that. And I do respect that. Again, I build my channel on just trying to be honest. You know, people don't like it at times. People do love it. Absolutely love it at times. But, you know, it's just all about being honest. And I really appreciate when somebody's just being honest. So it's a good answer to hear. But as regards to 6.2, I don't think the daily adds any context whatsoever or any sort of narrative to the reputations. That's a huge overplay, which will come back potentially to bite you in the ass if you say stuff like that. Because there is no narrative, there's no story, and I don't feel there's any context with these reputations. Again, just quickly reiterating what I said in the previous answer, I don't feel connected. I don't care about them. Don't care about the Saber Stalkers. Still don't care about the Hand of the Prophet, and I still don't care about the Order of the Arakoa. There is no genuine driven storyline that pops up that makes me give a shit about any of these things. And that is what we're missing. The great snippets of storyline from 5.1 and from 5.2 on the Isle of Thunder. Great aspects of storyline. Now, if they had that interwoven to what we're doing, then I could certainly potentially start to give a toss about these things. You know, suddenly I've got halfway through Friendly with Hand of the Prophet. Bing! A yellow quest suddenly pops up above Yirul's head. And she says, right, I need you to go to this part in Tanan Jungle to launch some sort of offensive here because we're doing this and that and the other. And then you start to get some sort of storyline which culminates. But what they have is their Garrison campaign. And the Garrison campaign storylines has seemingly have become the mecca for storytelling. It's just like, this is it. This is the golden palace of storytelling, and nothing else will meet these standards. Nothing else will have anything. This is just the be-all and end-all of storytelling. So I think the Garrison campaign storylines are actually harming the game more than helping the game, because it's, to me, stopping true development going into other areas. Or there's nothing wrong with having the Garrison campaign that focus on a very specific line of story, but at the other side of the scale, you do have all these other storylines which start with the Saber Stalkers, or the Hand of the Prophet, or the Order of the Arakoa, which start to get us invested, and also not necessarily just keeping us in Tanan Jungle, maybe taking us to some other little spots as well. But narrative is such an important aspect of an MMORPG, and Warlords of Draenor has none of it. And that is a major flaw of this expansion. 6.2 ain't bringing that back. But at least it's a good honest answer from Ian, in as much as he tells the truth. So next up we have Draenor questing was a blast, but the endgame lacks world content in my opinion. Dailies, gathering, PvP, lore, warfronts, etc. What's your philosophy on this moving ahead? Now Ian goes off and says about how proud they were of the content in Warlords of Draenor and the questing content in Warlords of Draenor. They said the misstep was the way that garrisons were made too rewarding. That people, instead of going out and gathering herbs or ore or stuff like that, they just stayed in the garrison to do all that. And with the profession buildings and whatnot, things felt so accessible that people weren't actually going out into the real world. And he does claim there is a fair bit of content out there. We'll get back to that in a sec. And he says that the outdoor content is the core to an MMORPG, and it was a failing of theirs that they didn't get this right, and it's something that they do need to fix in the future. Now, again, it's a fair play to him. It's another question where he does seemingly sort of fall upon his sword again. They do highlight missteps. Again, it's not something I fully agree with in some respects, and in another respect, I believe he's actually succeeded. So we'll go into both of these. Number one, there is a fair bit of content out there. There isn't. There really isn't. You can't say there's a fair bit of content because you can go out into the world and mine nodes. That's kind of pushing the envelope a wee bit. The world bosses, they're not rewarding. They're not even worth it. I don't think anyone's even bothering with world bosses anymore. Those died a very quick death. The Apexis crystal zones, we've been into all those issues already. And other than that, you're sort of looking at the reputation grinds, which again, we've already gone into in the Q&A about how poorly it was kind of executed. So what he's essentially saying is there was a fair bit of content out there, but it wasn't particularly good. None of it was particularly good. And that's kind of correct. It all kind of missed the mark. Grinding reps, grinding AP, world bosses, grinding profession materials. It's all kind of missteps there. Now, what he does say, though, which I think he's semi-succeeding on in patch 6.2, is he said that, the core element of an MMORPG is getting people out into the world, and that's something that we've got to fix. And I think to some degree in patch 6.2, they kind of have, in a sense of, when I was in Tanaan Jungle, or one thing that I certainly recognised quite a lot on the PTR for patch 6.2 was I was spending minimal time in my garrison. Whereas now, you just hover in your garrison, don't do anything, bounce around, going stir crazy. I wasn't actually doing anything in my garrison, period. If I was spawning in my garrison, I was immediately leaving. Or I was setting a quest on the command table and then immediately leaving. To go back to Tanaan Jungle or to go down to the shipyard and set another quest off there. Then go back to Tanaan. And because there are different elements in Tanaan, whether or not I believe they're fully successful or not is irrelevant. There are different facets in Tanaan, as much as there's AP grinding, there's rare grinding, there's some toy grinding you can do as well. There are like toys and stuff hidden around the place and whatnot. You could spend your time doing stuff in Tanaan because that's the focal point of the content. So I found that I was logging out in the bases. I was logging out in Volmar, and I was logging out in Lion's Watch and such, as opposed to hearthing back to my garrison and then logging out there. So in some respects, when I'm therefore going back into the game, I'm going straight into Tanaan Jungle. So I think there is an element of success in 6.2 that they've managed to kind of pull away somewhat from just being rooted in your garrison. How long that's going to last for, though, that's a different kettle of fish altogether. Because once you have got your reputations up and such, there might not be that much of an incentive. But I'll turn it all back around to myself again. When you have got your reputations and stuff, you might actually have flying. So if you have got your flying achievement by then it may at least just prevent you from sitting in your garrison. You might just want to go off and fly places instead. So you might just want to go explore the world through flight, just see if there are any nooks and crannies that you've missed, any secrets that you've possibly missed, any of that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm not saying it's the wrong thing. I'm just saying it's an option for you. So yeah, kind of, again, a goodish answer as far as I'm concerned as regards to that. But maybe overplaying your world content a little bit there, Ian. We then get a series of questions about garrisons, stuff which we've pretty much heard before. Why are we stuck in our garrisons? Criticisms about the what they class as the point click wait reward system and this kind of stuff, and they answer it pretty much with what they've kind of got into so far, in as much as garrisons are too rewarding. There's no real incentive for like I said, for profession people to get out there. People who have done a little bit of raiding can suddenly sit back and just accumulate gear upon gear from the Garrison missions, which again I find really, really bizarre, because when I stopped raiding, I got up to 9 out of 10 heroic on Blackrock, and I'm currently unsubscribed, but my character has currently got the mythic Blackhand trinket because I got it through a Garrison reward mission. And to me, that is just it's ridiculous. I shouldn't have it. I mean, I'm happy that I've got it, but I shouldn't have it. It's way too rewarding, because and then they focused on that, saying, yeah, you know, you could have actually just waited for all these loots to have come in while your guild was progressing, let's say, on Highmaul normal, and then by time you move into Highmaul heroic, you've suddenly got 6 pieces of Highmaul heroic gear from your Garrison command table. Therefore, when you start to knock bosses down, you don't need anything. You know, you're limited for rolls because you've pretty much already got the gear from that. So yeah, again, they said it's just because it was too rewarding, too easy to get stuff, and although they quite like the fact that the point-click wait allows people that've only got like 5 or 10 minutes before they get to work or go to school or whatnot to do something, that's why they've extended the time frames on the shipyard for missions. So if you wanted to get 100 gold, for example, from the shipyard, you'll probably have to send a ship away for a whole day. Whereas in your Garrison command table, it's like 4 hours or something like that. So they're increasing the length of time for missions to take on the shipyard, so people aren't waiting by the shipyard. They're literally sending the ships away and maybe coming back 24 hours later, as opposed to the command table where you're coming back a lot more regularly. But it's nothing we haven't really heard before. We then got a couple of questions relating to raiding, whether or not Ian was happy with the raiding paradigm, and also with whether or not he was happy with mythic raiding in general, based off the fact that so few people actually get involved with mythic raiding. And long story short, yes, he was happy. He was happy with the way that the raiding systems worked out, because he thinks it's been very accessible for people, especially with the normal and heroic versions, getting together in groups and whatnot. And yeah, he was also happy with the fact that even though so few people do mythic, even if they remove mythic, it would only probably take away about 5-10% of construction time regarding raids anyway. So it's no biggie. And he does like the fact that the sort of like the arms race to who is the best guild is now condensed into one level of difficulty, as opposed to which was better, the 10 or the 25. So yeah, it's all now been squished into this mythic 20. So everyone's just kind of going toe to toe on that one. So fair dues. Not really a lot you can criticise about that or to praise about that. It's perfectly good answers, if you ask me. Now, the next couple of questions pertain to dungeons. So, sorry, not sorry. I think we might be getting into a little bit of ranty period coming up very soon. So I'm going to deal with the first question first and try and get through it quite succinct, and then elaborate on the second one. So the first one is, why limit time walking to certain bonus time periods? I'm not going to do X other event if I don't like that content, but instead get to do the content I'm interested in more often. And Ian goes into the fact that Time Walker really serves more of a purpose as a catch-up mechanic for your alts. As anything for your real main character. For your main character, it's really a sort of nostalgic trip down memory lane of what he calls content which wouldn't hold up in today's World of Warcraft, which is also correct. But at the same time, they still wanted it to offer better rewards than current dungeons are offering at the moment. Now, first things first, it's a fair enough answer in as much as he's given an answer to it. But the very fact that you know, Time Walker's coming in as one of these bonus event periods. I haven't talked about these bonus event periods on my channel yet. I will do a video before the 6.2 release about them. But every few days, a new bonus event will appear, and it will be either dungeon, Time Walker dungeons, mythic dungeons, pet battles, extra Pexis crystals, and such and so forth. You kind of get the idea. I'll go into it more in depth in the video itself. And when the Time Walker event is open, that's when the Time Walker dungeons are available to do. When that event is not open, they won't be available to do. So you'll get to do the Time Walker dungeons, what, once every 4 to 6 weeks? Something like that, for about 4-day period. And the fact is, they have put this sort of like effort into scaling down characters that are at top level that can go down and do these old school dungeons. But even as an alt catch-up mechanic, I don't believe that to be correct at all, because Tanan Jungle with all the baleful stuff is going to act as a catch-up mechanic for that. And this sort of the time and effort that must have gone in to do this nostalgia trip, and it's not a nostalgia trip either, because I played TBC and these dungeons were awesome because of the fact that the way that your character was at that time, a lot more complex, a lot more spells and ability, a lot more in regards to CC, a lot more in regards to damage coming in, and all that kind of stuff. That these dungeons were hard. These dungeons harder, I should technically say. And these dungeons could be wiped in. Full stop. They could be wiped in if you weren't careful. If you got a little bit too cocky and above yourselves. Nothing like that anymore. Dungeons, nothing like that. And this is just like an LFR tourist trip through that. I didn't feel any nostalgia. I actually felt sorry for the content. I felt as if it was like an aging film star that had been dragged out of a retirement home and put in a bikini and told to look sexy, aged 86. And it was just like, oh no, you know, back 50 years ago, you're a stunner, but you know, no offense, I'm sure you've got a great personality, and nope, not your own teeth. But you know, it's just awful to kind of be a part of. Not nostalgia, no. It felt like they just needed to be taken round the back and put down. In this kind of current format, no, doesn't work for me at all, Time Walker. You might think differently when you get to do them, but me, no. A waste of development time that should have, I think, should have gone forward. And he spoke about how Time Walker was an issue that they wanted to do for years. Years now. But again, I just think, no, the past is the past. Look forward. There is so little that we've got to do in the current content. Stop thinking about dragging us back to do tourist modes of older content. The next question, the next dungeon question. There's actually another one after this. I think I said a couple. There's 3, I believe, in total. Dungeons in WoD went obsolete pretty quickly. Are there plans to tackle this issue going forward so content doesn't go to waste? Now, Ian says that they regret another regret that they had. There's plenty of regrets. This is definitely not a je ne regrette rien Q&A. There are plenty of regrets with Warlords of Draenor. It's quite interesting to think that technically patch 6.1 hasn't even hit, but there we go. He regrets that the dungeons were pretty much surplus to requirement really quickly on. There was no need for people to rerun them, and because they didn't offer anything like a Valor Point reward, that knocked them out the equation. Was nothing reward-wise for people return to the dungeons too. And he said mythic dungeons are going to change that in 6.2 because they're going to bring the current dungeons back to a relevant level by offering, I think it's 685 level gear, and then the final boss drops 700 item level gear. But it's mythic in name only. He said, these are not mythic difficulty dungeons, i.e. you don't need to be a mythic raider to go into these dungeons whatsoever. And I've experienced them on the PTR, and yeah, it's just a little bit tougher. And I can't see too many people, if you have an understanding of the dungeon anyway, having that much of an issue. Unless, let's say, you're in Skyreach and you want to run off and grab 3 packs like you do now, then you're going to be in trouble. But if you just deal with it pack by pack by pack, by boss, by pack, by boss, by pack, by boss, by pack, it's not going to be an issue whatsoever, and you're going to get highly rewarded for doing so without new dungeons coming in. So I've got to contain the mass rant for the final question, which is, so, no new dungeons, but rehashed time-walking dungeons and a venture journal to highlight old content. That the plan going forward. So, Ian says that it's not instead of. It wasn't a fact of bringing in Time Walker dungeons as opposed to bringing in new dungeons. He said that the art team that work on dungeons also work on raids. So the fact that they're working on the Hellfire Citadel raid meant no new dungeons in 6.2, which I kind of don't quite get that. Maybe that's, that could easily be a me thing, but I don't get that. I don't get how the same team that works on raids also work on dungeons, and it's an exclusive property. Whereas, when an expansion's released, we have raids, we have dungeons, so it's not an exclusive property then. Now, I know we can argue time constraints, say, yes, they've got 2 years to work on the release of an expansion, whereas they have X amount of time to work on a patch. But let's just say that is true, right? Since the end of all the content being created for 6.0 was done, it's been nearly a year since then. So we're not talking about a small, meagre amount of time here. Even though it was released in November, it was pretty much all cast iron, let's say, September-ish time. Okay, so we're looking at a good, from September of last year to now, that's 3 months, plus the 6 months, around 9 months. So 9 months, so 3/4 of a year. 6.1 offered nothing. Nothing at all of any worth whatsoever. It was just rehash the dungeons by adding in new rewards, adding a few new missions onto the Garrison command table, and pretty much that was it. There was very little. The selfie cam, we'll get to that later. The selfie and the Twitter and all that kind of stuff. But there was nothing of worth in patch 6.1 whatsoever. So those 9 months, I can't believe that in that period of time they couldn't have constructed the Hellfire Citadel raid and created new dungeons for 6.2. I can't accept that. I really cannot accept that. And then you've got to say, so what are they working on? And this is where people use a stock answer now. They just go to the stock answer of, well, they're working on future content, or they're working on the next expansion. Well, this is where we get into problems with expansions like this, because that seems to be the forever ongoing answer. They're working on the next thing, and yet when the next thing comes along, nothing's there. Nothing of worth is actually there at all. So maybe if they started concentrating on the current fucking content, there might actually be something there. But I can't accept that from September of last year to here we are coming towards the middle of June, and then with the launch in a couple of weeks' time, probably a week and a half's time or so, of 6.2, that hasn't been enough time not only to create Hellfire Citadel raid, but also to create a couple of dungeons to go alongside that, to complement the raid and put a more relevant spin on the dungeoneering system, put more relevant gear within the dungeoneering system, instead of having to fall back onto mythic difficulty level of dungeons, which just put new gear in old content. It's not a massively difficult thing to do, to scale up a few bosses by the sounds of it, and then just add new gear in. That doesn't seem particularly, massive time constraint in the grand scale of matters. So yeah, it just kind of gets my goat a bit. And the reason why it kind of gets my goat a bit is Ian did speak recently about dungeons being the heart, you know, about being crucial to an MMORPG. And we've seen nothing but the bastardization of dungeons since Mists of Pandaria. I know they've been cutting them down in number ever since, you know, Wrath and Kata. But even then, there was still plenty of them. But we hit Mists, we got 9, we got no more. We're in Mists of Warlords of Draenor now. We're 9 months in, we've got 8. We've got 8 and no more coming for the foreseeable future. None coming in 6.2. We don't even know when there'll be a 6.3 or what 6.3 is going to offer. So there is a chance, I'm not saying it's an absolute, but there is a chance that these could be the only dungeons, the only new dungeons that we get. And if the only way that they can keep dungeons relevant is just by, and he talks about this saying, looking forward, we're looking at trying to scale dungeons in the future, which just kind of made me cringe, because that to me just says, right, if we can scale dungeons, it doesn't incentivize us to create new dungeons for people. We just keep the other ones, the older ones, the 6 or 7 that we're releasing the next expansion, we just keep scaling them up a little bit and scaling them up a little bit more, so they're always relevant during additional patches, and then we'll just put better gear on top of it. And this sort of seems to be a big trend in World of Warcraft at the moment, and it's just like, instead of putting new things in, we just rehash the old stuff and over-incentivize with the rewards to get people to do them, and then start classing them as a success or classing them as good content. Ghostcrawler said something very poignant recently as regards to LFR, and I'm just using the context of what he said, not necessarily the fact that he said about LFR, but the context in which he said, you know, just because people do something a lot doesn't make it a success. And I absolutely agree with that. You know, because people do gravitate towards an easy way of getting gear. LFR is a very easy way to get epic gear. Does that mean LFR is a success? Judging by the way the community responds to it, no. It's not a success at all. It's probably done more harm to the game than good. You know, I don't care what your thoughts are on LFR. It is a pox on the game in the World of Warcraft. And LFR is a huge determining factor as to why we have fucking shit amounts of dungeons in the World of Warcraft anymore. Because they're no longer the bridge into raiding. So stuff like LFR has hit dungeoneering, and Ian doesn't seem to want to keep the fresh spin on dungeoneering either. It just looks like they're looking at ways now to keep scaling dungeons up and just throwing gear on top of it. You, when in doubt, just throw some higher level gear at it, and I'm sure some of it will stick. So yeah, I might have had a rant then. Right, now on to the question, which I think most people have probably tuned in to get the response from. Let's be fair now. Which is not an exaggerated question either, which I'll quickly go into as well. Where the person posing it says, why are you guys nerfing Demonology Warlocks into the ground? And I said it's not an exaggeration because Demonology Warlocks are receiving a blanket, which means across the board, 25% nerf, when the patch notes came out for patch 6.2. And it took effect, and Demonology Warlocks were neutered. They really were neutered. Now, Blizz have tweaked some of the figures for Demonology back up again, just a few, but not much. I mean, we're talking about little, little nipple tweakers, and that's about it. So still across the board, Demonology is most likely got around a blanket 22% nerf still, which is a hefty nerf. So there's no exaggeration on the part of the question. The answer, whether you agree with what Ian said or disagree with what Ian said, is quite remarkable. I mean, there's no wishy-washy answer here. Ian says what he means, and he says, I think this is a direct quote now, because we would prefer that you didn't play Demonology. Now, first things first, never mind my reaction. If you were seeing the video, and the whole, again, the Q&A is all linked in the description down below, so you can go to their Twitch and watch it and get a full understanding yourself. The reaction that I thought was hilarious was the reaction from Law. Because if you look at Law's face when Ian says that, his face is just saying, Holy shit! I can't believe you just said that. His eyes are just like saucers, and he's got this like... I mean, it's sort of a cheeky grin on his face, but it's kind of like a holy shit. Dude, that's the kind of stuff we say behind closed doors. And you've just gone and blurted it out to, I think, like 17,000 people who are watching the live Q&A. So that law in itself gave me totes value for money. So thank you, Law. Because I thought that was hilarious. Now, I've got to look at this, or I want to look at this from a pragmatic point of view. I get ragged on all the time for being negative. I'm not negative, I'm pragmatic. I look at things realistically, and a lot of people like to just bury their head in the sands. So when people like me come out with critical comments about the World of Warcraft, and the reason why we do it is not because we hate the game, it's because we bloody love the game, and we want it to get better. But they just turn, they just have their head in the sand, and they just hear criticism, criticism, criticism. It's called pragmatism. It's actually trying to do something which probably you're not doing and the vast majority of people do not do, and that's in trying to improve the game by highlighting issues. But in this sense, I do, again, have to look at this in a pragmatic point of view. And let's be honest, Ian has just said what we all think when our classes take a nerf, and the specs that we play take a pounding that we feel as if we have to move to another one. We whinge about it all the time, and the best way I can give an example is looking at the pure DPS classes, your hunters, your rogues, your mages, your warlocks, etc. Because we are always competing with the rest of our classes for the specs. Which spec is performing the best. If Demonology is performing the best, people gravitate towards that. If Marksmanship is performing the best, people gravitate towards that. If Fire is performing the best, people go to that. If Combat is performing the best, people go to that. That is the nature of the World of Warcraft. And if we can say in the 10.5 years of WoW, is the strongest spec for Warlocks the same as the strongest spec now? No! Never ever in a month of Sunday is it going to be. Because over the course of those 10.5 years, regardless of whichever pure DPS class you play, your specs have all rotated as to which is the most powerful. It's Beast Mastery, it's Marksmanship, it's Survival, it's Frost, it's Arcane, it's Fire, it's Demonology, it's Affliction. It happens all the time. It's nothing new. A lot of people getting on their high horses about this, and I'm hoping it's about another thing which I'm going to go into a little bit further, but not as regards to nerfing into the ground. But I do think there's a slight... some people are going to go, I can't believe Az just said this. There's a slight hypocrisy going on in the Warlock community right now, because a lot of people are moaning about Demonology getting nerfed into the ground. What the hell do you think happened to Destruction, folks, at the beginning of Warlords of Draenor? That was nerfed so far into the ground, it's just a forgotten about spec now. And one thing that Ian did say was, Destruction are doing good numbers. No, they're not. No, they're not. Affliction is going to dominate patch 6.2, Ian. Absolutely dominate, but there we go. So you not too many people jumped onto the Destructions. Hey, Blizzard, what the fuck, man? Because it wasn't even competitive. Now, Ian does say in the video that when raiding started in Highmoor, they saw a good cross-section of Affliction Warlocks, Destruction Warlocks, and Demonology Warlocks. And then as they moved into Blackrock, it was pretty much all Demonology. And the reason why they probably had a good spread of all three is because you never know how a class fully performs till you get to top level, do you? It doesn't matter how powerful a class is leveling up if it doesn't scale well with gear at level 100 and the other classes go streaming ahead of it. So when you get to Highmoor, which was the first raid, which was the opening raid of the expansion, yeah, you're going to have a cross-section of specs, and then people are going to see how they perform against each other, how they scale with gear, and it became very apparent early on that Destruction was just like, nah, no, bye-bye. You want to play Destruction, you're going to get... yeah. It's just so... people started to go to Affliction, which was doing alright, and then suddenly it became very apparent Demonology was the go-to spec because it was doing very alright. So that's where Demonology decided to get a nerf. And I understand that. I ain't got an issue with that whatsoever. That is just a part and parcel of the game, and that is something that you do have to whack on a hashtag get over it. If you can't handle nerfs and buffs coming in a rotation system, I don't want to say the cyclic word, in a cyclic motion, then you shouldn't really play, because you're only going to get frustrated, and you're only going to get raged out. But to say that they wanted to nerf it so people don't play it is just the wrong thing to say. You can't say that, because even if that's what you believe, Ian, and I do commend you on the honesty there, you've got to try and bring it in line. Or at least as close to the line as you can possibly get, because we know that balance is never an exact science, and it's never going to happen. All three specs are never ever going to perform on an equal parity with each other. Never going to happen. But you can't say, right, we're just going to pull it so far down now that you've got the choice of two specs, because actually one of the specs you spoke about, Ian, isn't viable either, so we have to pull destruction out the equation. So now all you're doing is trading Demonology for affliction in 6.2. I will be proven right on that. He says, crossing fingers. I will be proven right on that. So there's nothing there which, you know, it's not the right thing to say. You need to try and bring them to each other. And I said this about Destruction. I said the reason why Destruction's received such a heavy nerf is due to how OP it was in Mists of Pandaria. So they made it so bad that Warlocks wouldn't play Destruction and would go to a different spec. Which essentially is what Ian has just admitted for Demonology here. So I understand that this kind of business practice happens within the World of Warcraft, but you've got to try and balance them. You've got to try at least make it so people have choices. Should I go Demonology? Should I go Affliction? Should I go Destruction? Survival? Marksmanship? Beast Mastery? Combat? Assassination? Yada yada yada. You get my drift. Because, although, again, I commend the honesty, it's not the right kind of business practice. Because there is going to be a proportion of that Demonology community that play Demonology because they just love it. And Demonology has never been a spec which has really had its day in the sun. Affliction has, boy has it ever. Destruction has, boy has it ever. Demonology seems to have... Whenever Demonology seems to get powerful, it's almost immediately yanked down. It really is. It never seems to have that moment in the sun. 6.1 seems to have been that moment for Demonology. And now it's over before it's really begun, sort of thing. So, yeah, part of me commends the honesty of the answer. And I would rather Ian say these kind of answers, to be honest with you, 99.9% of the time out of 100. But your business practice, your answer, your solution is incorrect. To make it non-playable is incorrect. Because you just alienate a proportion of your community that like Demonology. So it's you know, from a pragmatic point of view, positives to take from it, also negatives to take from it. But Demonology Warlocks... look to respec. That's the only thing I can say. Unless, like me, who's gone back to Destruction, knowing it's the worst spec, but saying I don't care because it's the spec which I find most fun. He says, currently playing Affliction. Then, you know, all power to you. But if you're wanting competitively to do damage, I'm telling you right now, it's going to be Affliction all the way in patch 6.2, baby. And all you've done, Blizz, is just trade one demon, pun intended, for another demon. Right, now we've got a couple more questions which I'm just going to whiz through because number one of them, I ain't got a clue what I could bring to this conversation, and I don't want to insult the class and look like a complete ignoramus. So they talk about throughput healers versus absorbs, and Ian goes off about if you only have one priest in your raid, it's got to be a disc healer as opposed to holy, otherwise you're doing it wrong. Thought that was a bit harsh. But he said that the way that holy priests operate, they're not underpowered. They just do the same job as other healers, which could take that same role on. So if you do have just one priest, it really should be a disc. I'll leave that in your court, priests. And then also a quick question about profession changes coming in 6.2. And just very briefly, Ian mentions that Fell Blight is going to be something which can only be obtained out in the world. So it will get gatherers to go out there and try and find it. And also, your personal yields from professions, your dailies, etc., will be much greater to sort of compete almost in relation to what you get with your work orders. So hopefully it will allow you to do more quickly as opposed to having to just wait on a work order to complete. Both, I mean, first one, healers, I'll leave that in your court. Second one, fair enough. You know, you can't fault him for wanting to get gatherers back out in the world. Goodness knows they haven't done anything. Now, the next question, though, got a massive response from the chat. Oh, my goodness. When this question flashed up, everyone in the chat, well, I say everyone, a huge proportion of the chat, and he just started spamming up, going, yes, yes, yes. And the next question was, from someone who has played since 2005, I'd really like to know this. Why do you keep making everything so convenient? And also, do you feel the game is becoming too convenient? Now, the answer that we got was quite interesting, in as much as I think there was a huge convenient aspect missed. Whether it is on purpose or not, I do not know, but I will bring it to your attention after I've kind of gone through what Ian said. And he said that flying was a hot topic. You know, flying had been a hot topic as regards to travelling, and, you know, that was potentially one of the reasons why flying had been put to one side to get rid of that convenient aspect. He also said too many portals make life too convenient. And let's face it, in Ashram, there really aren't that many portals. You kind of got your Stormwind, your Iron Forge, and your Darnassus, I believe. But there's no, like, Dalaran or Shrine. So a lot of people still have their Hearthstone set to Shrine because all the portals are there, so they can go wherever they want. I do. I know on my characters, I certainly do, to make life a little bit more convenient. And it's this very, very strict balance, you know, easy balance to say, for us to get quite pious and say, well, the World of Warcraft's becoming also convenient, and then the vast majority of us have our Hearthstone set at the Shrine because of the convenience. So, you know, are we being a bunch of hypocrites? And this is not Blizzard's issue, it's our issue that we should look at ourselves about. And he also speaks about the fact that the group finder system has worked really well, in as much as you're still sort of applying to go into a group. It's still got a group leader. They're sorting through the people who are trying to get into the group, giving them yeses, nos, and all that kind of stuff, which is a little bit better than just the randomo grouping up by pressing, you know, I'd like to go into a random dungeon, please, and such. Which, again, fair enough. I think the group finder is a great feature in the World of Warcraft. I've really enjoyed its true inception. It's been in the game for a long, long time, but in different actual stages of development. And I do think it's found its niche as it is in the game at the moment. But the thing that Ian kind of really missed the point on, I think, with this, is we have to go no further than the Garrison to look at convenience, because you can log into the game in your Garrison. You go over to your command table and set your follower to get you some mythic Blackrock loot. You then go outside and pick herbs from the herb garden. You then go into your mine and get some ore. From there, you walk to your profession buildings and pick up your work orders of all the cloth or the enchanting materials or whatever that you've done. And after you've opened up your salvage from your salvage yard that has everything, you nip over to your trading post and swap out the materials that you don't need for materials that you do need. Do I have to go on, people, while going into your dwarven bunker and getting your extra bonus roll, while opening up your work orders and getting your follower upgrade? You know, I could go on and on and on and on and on. You never have to leave your Garrison. The convenience function of the Garrison is so much so that, you know, it's sort of like those people on the spaceship in Wall-E, isn't it? They're just all fat slobs on those floaty chairs. because they have no purpose anymore. They have everything done for them. This is how I feel that we are in the World of Warcraft right now, especially in Warlords of Draenor. We are those people floating around on those chairs because the convenience factor of what the Garrison offers, of course, is that much. And then at the same time, you can still be applying for Group Finder. You can still be putting yourself into random dungeons or LFR dungeon or LFR raid, inverted commas, etc. So I think Ian missed, should we give him the benefit of the doubt, missed a very huge aspect of the convenience factor and kind of went for the sort of distance one as opposed to what I think was the real kind of crux and crux or crooks, tomato of the question there. But boy, did that get some response from the crowd. Next question I think is a little bit of a beaut, and in all fairness to Ian, he gives some really honest answers here. They don't spend a lot of time on it, but still, because of that, I think I do again need to elaborate at the end and sort of give some pointers and feelers which I don't think other people have quite thought about yet. So, whoa, incoming. Do you feel artistic integrity arguments carry any weight after the Twitter /selfie patch? It's a belter of a question. I mean, that's a question where you sort of like hear and you're sort of like, ooh. Even I sort of like, ooh. Sort of cross my arms and hide my eyes and thinking, oh man, that is a shot fired right there, right to the head. Headshot. Now then, Ian, but like I said, Ian, he feels this very well, and he feels it very honestly indeed. And he says, look, the Twitter and the selfie components didn't take away any content from the game in as much as programmers and developers' time. He said a couple of programmers worked on the Twitter integration, and one programmer and one designer worked on the selfie cam integration. And they only kind of like came in, I think for the selfie cam anyway, they only like came in a couple of weekends just to do it. It was a very short and easy thing to integrate within the game. So I think I tweeted out yesterday, apologies, I think I tweeted out that it took one person to create the selfie cam. No, one designer, one programmer. So it actually took a total of two. My bad. So that still leaves 216 people, though, apparently. But nonetheless. Anyway, he says, yes, there is artistic integrity. He believes that there is artistic integrity in bringing stuff like the selfie cam and Twitter. I don't know. I think he might be pushing the boat a wee bit there, to be perfectly honest with you. Let's face it. The selfie cam isn't artistic integrity at all. It's just narcissism. Because we live in a narcissistic society. So I don't think just because we live in this narcissistic society, and I'm as guilty as anyone else, I am not excluding myself from this. I self-promote like a trooper as well. But because we live in this narcissistic society, it's therefore considered the norm. And therefore people start to kind of, well, it's an artistic form, isn't it? The selfie and all this kind of stuff. I don't know. I don't think that everything has to take on board artistic form just because they are culturally popular at the time, but that's just by the by. But I've got to say, as a rule of thumb, I've personally got nothing against either pieces of content. I use Twitter like a trooper, so Twitter integration is actually a good thing. I've not used it particularly much in WoW. I could have used it. I've used it as the butt of a few jokes, but that's because it's a very easy target, and my channel's still meant to entertain people. I think people just want me half the time to sit behind a desk in a suit and just report on WoW like it's the fucking news or something. And today on WoW, somebody walked into a pit. They lost 36% of their health, managed to crawl out, and then used a health stone. I think they just want that sort of, like, stoic news. Go to another channel for that bullshit. I'm going to twist things at times. I'm going to pervert things at times. But I'm always going to do it in a form of entertainment, hopefully to give you guys a giggle. I'm not trying to pervert any truth. If I pervert something, it's normally in the form of for entertainment's purposes. It's still an entertainment channel at the end of the day. It just happened to deal with video games. And the selfie thing I'm not particularly interested in whatsoever as a bit of content for WoW, but at the same time, it doesn't offend me, doesn't affect me, so, what, I don't give a toss if you want to take selfie pics. It's entirely up to you. Goodness gracious. I do real life selfies on Twitter. And then he also goes on to say that, yes, patch 6.1 was extremely light in content. Those are his exact words, extremely light on content. So that's a big admission there, and fair props for him for saying so. And he said that they actually worked on patch 6.1 really as a bug-fixing patch, and a patch that was going to bring some quality of life improvements and a few additional rewards to go on the command table and such. And it really should have been called patch 6.0.5 and been rolled out as like a hotfix patch, which is what a lot of us have actually said. And to be quite honest with you, if it came out as patch 6.0.5, I don't think I really would have batted an eyelid. Blizzard could have said, we've just rolled out a hotfix patch, getting rid of these bugs, that bugs. Also, we've just added Twitter and a selfie cam as a bit of a laugh. And we've just mixed up a few more rewards on the command table and allowed you a couple of tweaks here and there with profession building. If they'd done that, I think people might have actually been a little bit grateful. You know, but bigging it up to be a patch, and especially when they do start to name patches now, like Landfall and the Thunder King Falls, or the Lich King Falls, or Fall of the Lich King, and all that kind of stuff, because they get these grandiose names now. When 6.1 was named 6.1, and then they didn't give it a name because obviously there was nothing to really. What were they going to call it? Fucking selfies from heaven. Twitter me this, Twitter me that. They knew they couldn't give it a proper name. So it just, if they had rolled it out as a hotfix, then people probably would have taken it, pretty well, saying, all right, okay, it's been out for 2 or 3 months now. They've just rolled a few hotfix patches and just chucked a couple of little bits on there. But if people have then challenged Blizzard saying, what is this patch 6.1? Blizzard could have turned around and gone, no. This is not patch 6.1, and it's not intending to be patch 6.1. This is just a hotfix patch, doing a few tweaks here and there. And then people could have got back to bitching about when patch 6.1 was going to drop. Because according to Ian's response, and this really should have been called patch 6.0.5, this is the big thing now. Patch 6.2, which is coming out, should in theory be patch 6.1. And that's a big thing to think about, because the game's going to be out, or it's out now for 7.5 months. By the time it lands, the game's going to have been out for nearly 8 months until the first patch hits. The first legitimate patch hits, which is a huge thing, because the new patch is going to bring with it the final zone, which is on Draenor at the moment, which, let's face it, at BlizzCon, they certainly alluded to being open at launch. It was only very, very close to the release date of Warlords of Draenor that they suddenly came out and went, oh, by the way, no Tanaan jungle never was intended, which we all know was a crock of shite. They probably run out of time, run out of this. More likely the garrisons were causing so many issues, which they were doing at the time, that it caused these type of problems. So in theory, patch 6.2 is actually patch 6.1. So with the amount of content coming in 6.1/2 versus the kind of content which has been released in other 6.1 patches, yes, it kind of beats Pandaria, but it doesn't really beat old, patch 6.1 for Wrath of the Lich King, nor does it really build the Burning Crusade either. That had a decent 0.1 patch as well, from what I can recall on my patch 0.1 video countdown. So it kind of goes along par with that. So, suddenly this being touted as 6.2 being touted as the biggest content patch that they've ever done. Oh, set yourself up for failure there. You're playing a very dodgy game there. So yeah, artistic integrity started off the question, but I think it had a lot more to it. Had a lot more to it, and be mindful that based off Ian's words, this is in theory patch 6.1 coming out in just over a week's time. Eek. Right, let's move this on. So I'm going to touch upon the next question pretty quickly. Why are Tier 8 PvE and PvP gear sets recolors of each other? Doesn't really help player identity. Now, Ian says that there are still 2 sets of gear which has been created here. What they've done, though, is instead of cutting it in half with PvE on one side and PvP on the other, they've cut it horizontally, and instead it's like Mythic and top PvPers at the top with their fresh set, and then everybody below that, heroic, normal, below that, and honor gear and whatnot below that in recolors. So they said this. Yes, there's still 2 sets, but we've spliced it in a different direction. That's all. Personally, I don't like that at all. I don't like that at all. I think I've kind of like got the backing of PvPers here. PvPers don't. They like the fact that they PvP. They not anymore. They fucking don't. But they like the fact that they're recognised as PvP players as opposed to PvE players. So when you see a PvPer come up when you're out in the world and he's in his PV or her or in their PvP gear, then you're sort of like, oh shit. And then you're sort of like running away from them if you're on a PvP server because you know they're going to fuck you up. But now it's ridiculous. It's like shopping for paint at your local supermarket or your local shop. It's like somebody's coming up to me. He's in the gear. It's a green colour. Hold on, let me get my colour chart out. Green colour. Is that PvE or PvP? Wait a minute. Oh, it's PvP. Hold on. Oh, no, it's just Honour. It's just like that. It's like you're coming with your own Dulex colour card to decide who's coming at you, bruh. No, and especially when there's so few people doing mythic raiding, to have this whole set made up for them. I'm not trying to dish you mythic raiders. I know there are people that mythic raid and are very proud of doing so. You should be. There's no reason why you shouldn't be. But still, to have sort of like a whole piece of gear, a whole tier of gear made for just such a low percentage of people. I think that's a little bit off, personally. And as far as I'm aware as well, it only seems to be a couple of pieces which are redone, like head, shoulders, maybe belt. Just like a couple of pieces that are redone. So it's not as if they've done the whole set. Anyway, I think a lot of the core design, sort of like gloves, I might be wrong here, but gloves and chest and stuff are pretty much identical on this part. Anyway, so yeah, I'm not going to go too much further into that, but I think the old system works better where you could look at somebody and immediately say PvP, and look at somebody and say immediately PvE instead of getting your Dulux matte emulsion colour chart out to see where these people are coming from. Right, let's carry on. And then the very final question is, why are there no agility weapons that drop off Archimond? All the agility classes don't get 635 weapons. I'm going to briefly touch on this, not too much, but this all goes back to this progressive gear scaling, and Ian talks about that, and he says that, they will get their weapons earlier. There might be 630 as opposed to 730 as opposed to 735, but it means that they'll be going into the Archimon fight more powerful than classes that are actually looking to get their hands on the 735 weaponry. So it balances itself out. I don't necessarily agree with that. I understand that they will be more powerful going into the fight, but it's no more powerful than, let's say, somebody managing to get a weapon from Gruul, let's just say, and then somebody not. They're still running their Highmaul weapon, really. We just come to accept that as rule of thumb. Maybe they just stopped giving out the weapons so early on. If they wanted to do something like that, don't put big weaponry on your first couple of bosses. Maybe just gate it a little bit further as you progress into the raid. Maybe just the odd class here or there to help out. Maybe put a little bit more trinkety at the front of the raid to give that sort of boost, because trinkets can make an awful lot of difference if they're used in the right sort of predicament. I don't think anyone really thinks this whole gear ramp up in Hellfire Citadel, where you start off with, what's it, 700, 705, and then by the end it's 735. I don't think there's anyone that really thinks it's necessary. It's like, no, nobody asked for this. Nobody's like screaming for this. Was it really necessary to do so? Not really. And I think we're just going to get into a point where it's going to be messy. It's going to be Lionel Messi. And just for the sake of whatever they're trying to achieve, which I'm not actually sure what they are. So, okay, so those were the questions. No more were asked after that because they ran out of time. They just slightly ran over an hour, and fair play to them for that. So, overall reaction, because I've got to give a reaction to the interview as a whole. So, as regards to quality of the questions that were asked, I think it was a very good Q&A, to be perfectly honest with you. Sure, not every question was a haymaker that were, demanding a decent and a specific reply from Ian, but you couldn't have had an hour of just that. It would have been quite depressing, to be honest with you. I think they balanced it rather well. I thought there were plenty of difficult questions versus, a little bit of fluff just so he can get his teeth into a little bit of 6.2 promotion and whatnot. And there's nothing really wrong with that. I mean, at the end of the day, I know people could call it a little bit cynical or whatever, but let's face it, the Q&A was to try and give 6.2 some biggie uppy. Let's have no sort of doubt about that. That was one of the aspects of the Q&A, is the fact that it kind of comes at this time when 6.2 is a week and a half away or so. And I thought Ian came across as very genuine. I mean, I like the man. Personally, I like the man. There are some people there which I think could do with a good slap across the face. But Ion Hazzikostas is not one of them. I do think the guy is very impassioned about what he does. He obviously has so much love for his raid construction and boss fight construction, whatever. And it comes across, and I think he's well-spoken, and he comes across as a very decent bloke. And there was at no point during this Q&A where I thought to myself, he's being purposely evasive. Sure, there were times where I was just like, come on, Ian, I can get a little bit more out of you here. Come on, I get a little bit more out of you. Especially with questions like the convenience aspect of WoW. Maybe I'm giving him the benefit here because he had done quite a big discussion on Garrisons earlier, and he had talked about how you're never wanting when you have your Garrison. So maybe he just didn't want to go over old ground. So I'm quite prepared to give him the benefit of the doubt there. What I can say, though, is did I leave the Q&A buoyant and optimistic for the future of WoW? Well, if I just said an out-and-out no, that sounds a wee bit depressing. But I didn't leave the Q&A thinking, going forward, we're looking in a good position here. Although he did admit a lot of their mistakes, and he did admit a lot of missteps with Warlords of Draenor, and that was all well and good, but I didn't see any potential sort of remedies for this, because he kind of said, well, we missed it here, but come patch 6.2, this is going to happen. Like reputations being one of them. He said, yeah, we're completely messed up with 6.0 reputations, but 6.2 we believe has sort of like a narrative going forward with them, and they don't. They don't have a narrative going forward, and they're not particularly grindy. And they really are, because you've got the core reputation with the Horde and the Alliance that's gated behind doing 3 Apexis crystals per day. And that's just horrible stuff, because we've done so many of that kind of crap already. We don't need to be gated with 3 Apexis crystal zones per day in Tanaan Jungle just to keep on top of that rep. That's not any good at all. The Saber Stalkers, they can be killed for rep. I swear to God, they're going to turn into an Emperor Xiaohao. People are going to say, oh, wait a minute. I kill these, I get reputation. Group up, everybody. Bang, bang, bang. We're going to see some flipping kitty aside going on over in that little segment of the map. And then with the Order of the Arakoa, although you can get their requested quest item from defeating rares, The easiest way to do it is by opening up chests in Apex's crystal zones. While you're there, folks, fancy doing an Apex's crystal zone. You know, so there's lots of little nuances which weren't really sort of aforementioned by Ian or sort of brought to the front there. So I thought he bigged up stuff which I think is going to get found out very quickly indeed. And then we had the aspect of the scaling with dungeons, which again just made me cringe, because it said to me they're not looking to invest in putting new dungeons in an expansion as it develops. All they're looking to do is to scale up the current dungeons and throw some more gear at it in an attempt to make it relevant. So in broader terms, rehashing older content. I think mythic dungeons is a big deal, or could have been a big deal. So to then be attached upon the 8 dungeons which we've been doing for 8 months now, it doesn't speak to me. It doesn't say, oh, come on, Az, come do our dungeons. It's just like, oh yeah, I've just got to do the same dungeons again, a little bit harder, a little bit more carefully, and then we're going to outgear those and they're going to become a joke anyway again. So that wasn't particularly exciting. Then we have the nerfs coming into the command table because of the way that gold is so easy to generate. So you're going to start to see diminishing returns with the gold. And then the shipyard, which looked like could have been an amazing piece of content with some good ideas behind it. It just turns into another Garrison command table that actually just takes a long time for you to get missions done, as opposed to 15, 20 minutes, an hour, which the command table does. So there was no sort of fixes, there was no sort of solutions to get me excited going into 6.2 and further beyond into 6.3. With reputations, where is that Lore Walker reputation? And not necessarily talking a carbon copy of it, but that Lore Walker reputation of Miss of Pandaria was such a clever way to gain rep. It was something completely different that we'd never seen before. Where is that inventiveness in Warlords of Draenor? Who's stepping up to the plate at Blizzard and saying, do you know, I've got a really cool way to get reputation that doesn't necessarily involve even fighting a mob. It could involve exploration. Bearing in mind, nobody is out in the freaking world at the moment. So a reputation system based on exploration is an absolute gem of an idea if they can do it correctly. There are so many little facets which could easily be tweaked to get people out into the world and beyond. But positives that we can take from 6.2, well, at least I'm not rooted in my garrison anymore. I'm logging out at the base, Volmar or Lion's Watch, whatever it's called in Tanaan. At least then I'm sort of logging in and out there. I'm very rarely going back to my garrison and sitting on my ass there. I've got something, or at least a different aesthetic to do so. And if multiple people start doing that, then at least those bases are going to feel, dare I say it, like social hubs, because the social aspect of Warlords of Draenor thus far has been utterly abysmal. It's an MMORPG, and no fuckers talking to each other. Nobody's interacting with each other. It's really, really weird. It's like, again, cabin fever. You like getting cabin fever in your garrison. It's a very, very odd situation to be in when the world should be so sort of big and people should be out there. But also, another thing which can force people out into the world potentially is when they start to get these reputations too revered and we get to see people getting their flying. Whether you're pro flying, con flying, it's absolutely irrelevant. Just the very fact that people will be able to take to the skies might give them the impetus to go out into the world. Do you know something? I am going to do that archaeology now. Do you know something? I am going to go find those pet battle masters casters now that I have a more direct and controlled method of going between them, because there isn't anything relevant outside of Tanaan in 6.2 that should offend anyone by flying anymore. And I'm somebody that believes we should be grounded in Tanaan jungle, so that aspect confuses me, but never mind. So, although we got some answers, and although we got some well, I wouldn't say apologies, but we got some admission of some big errors, it's still way, way, way up into the air whether or not the World of Warcraft will improve. And that's the scary point to me, because I don't think 6.2 is up to huge amounts. I think a lot of it is rehashed smoke and mirrors. But now that we know we're getting a patch 6.3, and the chances are 6.2 is going to be with us for a considerable piece of time now, I doubt we'll see any new content this side of BlizzCon. The potential for Farallon to appear in patch 6.3 is there, and I've got a sneaky suspicion that the community have spoken so much about Farallon, Blizzard are saying behind the scenes, do you know something? I think we really need to do this Isle in 6.3. And we might get something more akin to Timeless Isle with some more fun aspects attached to it. If Farallon could be made fun, well, even if it makes it into the game, and it could just break away from this whole Apexis Crystal bullshit and maybe bring in a couple of reputations with a freaking narrative to drive them, so we give two shits about the people that we're doing quests for or grinding for, then maybe 6.3 is going to be the patch which gives me the tingle, or at least gives me the idea about where the World of Warcraft is going to go, going now into a future expansion. And so before I leave this video, I will say this right now. If the next expansion isn't Ashara with Nagas, I am rioting on this channel, I swear to God. But there you go, they're my thoughts and feelings about the Q&A. I know some people might be shocked by what I've said, in as much as, you know, I do actually believe in some of the aspects which have been said here, and I do certainly empathise with some areas with Ian, but I try and just be honest, you know? I'll never try and bash people for the sake of bashing, I just want to give an honest answer. And it was so refreshing to hear a little bit of, you know, a little bit of humility coming from the WoW development team. And it was nice to just be spoken to as what I felt was a valued member of the community, which I haven't felt like for years now with WoW. So I do appreciate that coming from Ian and the crew. So, all we don't want you to play Demonology aside, I hope you enjoyed the vid. If you did, do give a thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel. Follow me on social media and Twitch for live streaming. Those links are in the description down below, and I'll be back with some more stuff very soon. You take care, everybody. Bye-bye.